Hello, my name is Leo Roberts. Today we shall be looking at the topic skeletal system and tissues in animals. Objectives of lesson. By the end of the lesson, students should be able to 1. Define skeleton. 2. Mention the 3 types of skeleton. 3. Mention the 3 types of skeletal materials. 4. Mention the parts that make up the mammalian skeleton. 5. Describe the Pentadiety plan. And 6. Give at least 5 functions of the skeleton. Now, the structure of a skeleton. What is a skeleton? A skeleton is a bony framework that helps to support the body of an organism. It gives it shape and protection as well. Types of skeleton. There are 3 types of skeleton, namely 1. Hydrostatic skeleton. In this type of skeleton, organisms make use of pressure from their inner fluid as a form of support. Our major focus here is on the fluid. The fluid's pressure pushes against the muscular wall of the organism, while the wall itself exerts pressure back on the fluid, thus supporting it. It is found in soft-bodied animals like sea anemones, jellyfish, earthworm, etc. The second type of skeleton is called exoskeleton. This skeleton is found outside the body of organisms. It is composed of a substance called cuticle. Our major focus on this is that it is found outside the body. Now, cuticle is made up of a non-living skeletal material called chitin. And chitin is found in invertebrates like insects, crustaceans, arachnids, and so on. The third type of skeleton is called endoskeleton. This skeleton is found inside the body of organism. So our focus here is inside the body. Endoskeleton is made up of skeletal material such as cartilage and bone. From the discussion above, we can point at 3 skeletal materials, which are A. Chitin. Chitin is a non-living material. B. Cartilage. Cartilage is made up of living cells called chondroblast. C. Bone. Bones are made up of living cells called osteocytes. Note that cartilages are softer than bones as found in infants, but with the deposit of mineral salts into them, they can become hardened and turn into bones. This process is called ossification. Now let's look at the mammalian skeleton. The mammalian skeleton is divided into 2, and the 2 are 1. Axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton includes the skull, the vertebral column, the ribs, and the sternum. The ribs and the sternum make up what we call the ribcage. The second one is appendicular skeleton, and it includes the limb girdles and the limbs themselves. Now, let's look at the axial skeleton. Like I said, it is made up of 3 parts, which are the skull, the vertebral column, and the ribcage. Now, the skull. The cranium of the skull protects the brain, while the eye sockets protect the eyes. The eye sockets are the holes at the facial part of the skull, where the eyeballs are fixed into. The cranium of the skull is divided into 4, namely the frontal bone, the parietal bone, the temporal bone, and the occipital bone. We can as well say that the skull is divided into 3 parts. The first one is called the cranium, which we have discussed the 4 parts that make up the cranium. We have the facial part of the skull, where we have the eye socket, the nasal cavity. And the last part is the jaw, where the teeth are fixed to. So this is an image of a skull. You can study it for better understanding. Now, the second one is the vertebral column, also known as the backbone or the spinal column. There are 5 groups of small bones. Altogether they make up 33 bones that make up the backbone. The function of the vertebral column is to protect the spinal cord, which is a soft tissue that runs through it. Now from the image below, you can see the position of the backbone in human. Now we also have the 5 groups of the bone making up the vertebral column. The first 7, we call them the cervical bones. Now these are found at the neck region. The first cervical bone is called the atlas, and the second one is called the axis. So the first 2 are atlas and axis. The second bones there, or the second vertebrae, they are known as thoracic vertebrae. We have 12 of them. These ones are found at the chest region, and that is where the ribs are attached to. The next 5, we call them the lumbar bones. The lumbar bones. And these bones, they are found at the upper abdominal region, and they bear most of our weights. So we have the sacral bone, which can fuse together to form what we call the sacrum. Now we have 5 bones making up the sacrum. And the last set of bone is the tail bones, or the shoulder bones. They can fuse together to form cocci in human, but there are other animals that have more of these bones, so their tails are very long. Now the last part of the exoskeleton is the ribcage. Now don't forget that the ribcage is made up of the ribs and the sternum. There are 12 pairs of ribs in man, altogether 24. The first 7 pairs are the true ribs. These are true because the ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae at the back and to the sternum bones at the front. The next 3 pairs are called the false ribs because they are attached to the thoracic vertebrae at the back and to the 7th pair at the front, while the last 2 pairs are the floating ribs. They are attached to the thoracic at the back and attached to nothing at the front. Now the ribs are attached to the chest bone, like I mentioned, or the sternum at the front. The ribs and the sternum make up the rib cage. The rib cage protects vital organs like the lungs and the heart, which are encaged within it. So this is the image of the ribs. You can see the position of the true ribs, the false ribs, and the floating ribs. Now the second one is the appendicular skeleton. The lip girdles and the limbs make up the appendicular skeleton. The lip girdles form a kind of place for the limbs to attach to. It is divided into the pectoral and the pelvic girdle. So the lip girdles are pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. Now the pectoral girdle is made up of the shoulder bone, also known as the scapula, and the collarbones, also known as the clavicle. Scapula is a flat and triangular shaped bones at the back, while the clavicle is a long and slender bone at the collar region. Now the humerus attaches to the pectoral girdle at a hole called the glenoid cavity. So if you look at the image here, you see the position of the clavicle, the scapula, the humerus, and of course the glenoid cavity. Also below we have the structure of a scapula. You can take your time to study the image. Now the pelvic girdle or the hip bone is divided into 2 halves, which are fused together at the front to form an immovable joint known as pubis symphysis. Now each of the halves consists of the part called ilium, the pubis, and ischium. All you need to do is study the pelvic bone, you will see all the parts. Now there is a hole there where the femur can be attached to, and that is called the acetabulum. The function of the pelvic bone is to protect the reproductive organs in the body. The limbs is divided into 2. The limb is divided into 2, which are the forelimbs, which is known as the hand bones, and the hind limbs, which is also known as the leg bones. The limbs, both the arm and the leg bones, are generally arranged in a pattern called the pentadactyl plan. This plan includes one long bone. Now if you look at the forelimbs from the image below and the hind limb, you see that the first long bone is called the humerus, while that for the hind limb is called the femur. And this is followed by two long bones that lie side by side. For the forelimbs, that is the radius and the ulna. For the hind limbs, that is the tibia and the fibula. Then 9 small bones in 3 rows. For the forelimbs, that is the carpus, also known as the wrist, and in the hind limbs, that is the tarsals or the ankles or ankle bones. Then we have another set of 5 bones. For the forelimbs, that is the metatarsal palm, and the metatarsal, that is the metacarpus for the palm, and metatarsals for the foot for the hind limbs. And then we have small bones that make up what we call the phalanges. For the forelimbs, they form the fingers. For the hind limbs, they form the toes. So the pentadactyl plan includes one long bone followed by 2 long bones that lie side by side, the 9 small bones in 3 rows, 5 bones, and then the small ones that make up the phalanges. And let's look at the forelimbs. The forelimb, note that the head of the forelimb or the humerus is fused to the pectoral girdle at what we call the glenoid cavity. That's actually a kind of a hole or a socket. Now if you look at the image of the forelimb, you see the upper arm is called the humerus. This followed by ulna and radius, followed by 9 bones that make up the wrist bone, and then we have the metacarpus that make up the palm, and then we have the phalanges, which are the finger bones. Now looking at the hind limbs, note that the head of the femur is fixed to the pelvic girdle and what we call the acetabulum, as seen in our previous image. Now also the femur bone is the longest bone in the body, and if you study this image taking it from the femur, you have the femur there, followed by the patella, which is the nail cap. After that we have the tibia and the fibula, then we have the tarsals, we have the metatarsals, and then we have the toe bones, which are also known as the phalanges. Okay, functions of the skeleton: it enables us to move. Without skeleton we cannot move. It gives support to the body, it gives shape to the body, it stores mineral salts like calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium in the body. It protects delicate organs like brain, heart, uterus, etc. in the body. 6 is that it helps to manufacture red blood cells. This one takes place in the long bone marrow. The 7th function here is that it serves as a surface for muscles to attach. And don't forget that muscles are attached to bones by what we call the tendons. Alright, these are our student activities. For you to assess your understanding of this lesson, all you need to do is answer some of the questions here. And how do you do that? You just need to click on the link. It will take you to a platform where you can assess the question. So I want to say thank you for learning. Thanks for learning.